Hey there. I want to do something a little bit different than my other videos. So if you've been watching my channel or seen any of my other videos, I typically talk about Betty's, which is a women's healthcare company that I'm working to start in San Antonio that focuses on younger women. Today, however, I want to share a few tips and tricks about working remotely. I have worked remotely for about 8 years, or did work remotely for about 8 years before starting Betty's or getting on this entrepreneurial journey. And I actually look back and think about how good of a precursor it was to have had the experience of working remotely before setting out to become an entrepreneur. Um, it's allowed me to really have a schedule and get into the habit of being a little bit isolated and figuring out how to work with that. If you're used to going into an office, you're used to the commute, you're used to the energy at an office, you're used to the social interaction that you get day in and day out. I can only imagine for entrepreneurs who go from that experience into a more isolating work from home situation, how you're not just dealing with getting your business up and running and learning how to be an entrepreneur, you're also learning how to work remotely. So this video has 5 tips that I have learned over the past 8 years that I also see as being impactful to my entrepreneurial work, and I hope you enjoy them. So the first one is to make your connections meaningful. When you're a remote employee, you tend to use 2 primary means of communication: email and phone call. And so when you do that, those communications tend to be extremely transactional. You don't get a lot of personal interaction. You don't get a lot of really get to know your colleagues or your business partner or maybe your client or customer that way. If you're in sales, you know that the on-site visits, that those in-person meetings that you have with your customer are really important for closing the deal. That's why so many salespeople travel so much. They know they have to be in front of their client in person. So without that, what do you do? There are 3 ways to make your connections more meaningful when you are restricted to a home office. The first one is encourage everyone that you speak with to use video. Now you might be thinking, Jen, I don't want to use video. The whole purpose of me working from home is so I can throw on my sweats and I don't want to put makeup on or fix my hair. After a while, I got pretty used to throwing on a shirt that would pass as, reasonable for a video chat. I became less concerned with makeup and hair. I looked presentable, but it was a different standard than was in the office, and it was perfectly acceptable for my conversations in front of my colleagues. Now, you know your office culture and what appearance you need to maintain to be professional, so I encourage that. But don't be afraid to do video. You have to overcome that hurdle, because when you're on video, it really does feel like you're more in an in-person meeting. And it establishes a routine with the people that you work with to let them know, hey, I'm here, I'm present, recognize that I want to weigh in on a topic. People are more likely to tune into what you have to say if you're visible, and you can be visible digitally thanks to technology. If you are working with a team within a team, make sure they have multiple ways to get in touch with you. If email or phone don't work, you might be on conference calls, you might have stepped away from your computer for just a moment, and if they don't have access to you, it can easily become out of sight, out of mind. Unlike in an office, when they walk past you in a hallway, it's like, oh yeah, I wanted to ask you this question. So you want to make sure that you are on some type of chat or message function, whatever your company has to offer. Use the technology available to you, but find ways to create that in the hallway reminder, or that, I hate to say it, water cooler, because it doesn't really exist anymore, the water cooler conversation, and that type of atmosphere digitally. And as the remote employee, it is up to you to create that. And the last thing I'll say about making meaningful connections is just to be on site as much as you possibly can. There might be a case where you don't have a home office to go to, and therefore you can't That's fine. Maybe there are other in-person meetups that you can create with your colleagues or others to make sure you're getting that in-person time. As much as you try to have a digital presence, you can do things day in and day out that make it better and kind of cultivate that relationship. However, if you can get in person, that really is the best way. And you might not need to do that every week or even every month, but with some regular recurrence, maybe quarterly would be a good amount. Do try to get some real face time. I've tried a few different schedules throughout my remote working situation where I may have been working a few hours and then taking some breaks, or I might have worked more in the morning, really early in the morning, and taken off earlier in the afternoon, or I might have done a little work in the evening and a little work in the morning and taking a break during the day if I didn't have any calls scheduled. And while some probably work really well that way, personally for me, I needed consistency. Any of those scenarios probably would be okay as long as each day looked roughly the same. But when I didn't have a consistent schedule, it made it a little bit more challenging for other people who might be scheduling time with me, but it just made me, it just presented more of a challenge for me to be able to differentiate my work life and my home life. Many nights I spent working until the wee hours of the morning, or the weekends it was there. Sometimes it can get to the point where it's always in the back of your mind to just go into the other room, do a little bit of work for a while, and suddenly you've missed out personal time with your family. So consistency actually helps me battle that to where I feel like I have a delineation that I've created in my work life and my home life. Tip number 3 is to have a dedicated space and be intentional about it. This was important, hugely important to me when I first started out, because when we moved to San Antonio 8 years ago, I had an office in the upstairs room of our rental house. It was toward the back of the house and kind of far away from the main area. And I realized I did not like working in that space. I felt too isolated, even though anywhere in the house I would have been by myself. I just felt isolated. I felt too far removed from the conveniences of, the home, like the kitchen or the front door if we had deliveries, anything like that. And so when we bought a home, I made sure I had an office that was going to be more conducive to my preferences. So I have an office in the front of the house now. It's on the main floor. I can leave my work in there. It can be a little bit out of sight, out of mind, so that weekends and my personal time feel more personal. They don't, again, feel like, well, I have my job right there and I can just, open up my computer while I'm watching TV or eating dinner and knock a few things out. I can do that. I have done that. But it has made me a healthier remote worker by not making that part of my routine. All right, tip number 4 is one of my favorites, one of my hardest lessons to learn, which is to be present on phone calls. If you're like me, you might need to be doing something while you're on a phone call. I have a really hard time listening on the phone and when I'm not doing a video chat and getting easily distracted by the emails that are coming in. So just standing in my office, being in my office is actually a distraction when I am on the phone. So I tend to pace, allow myself to do some menial tasks around the house. That can include like doing laundry. If I'm able to mute myself so that others on the phone don't hear, I might load or unload the dishwasher. Really simple, kind of mindless things that I can do that don't distract me from the phone call. And in fact, just having something physical to do allows me to better focus. That might be something completely different for you. I would just encourage you to figure out what that is and just make a point to be intentional about your time on the phone and do whatever you need to do to be actively engaged in that call. And my 5th and final tip is to give yourself a break. When you work from home, your hours are spent differently than when you're in the office. I found that at home, I would get to about 6 hours, 6.5 hours. and kind of go kaput. This is, I'm not talking about like the after lunch slump. This is different. This is, I'm mentally exhausted, I'm drained. I would try to combat it by scheduling as many calls as I could for the afternoon and allowing my morning time to really focus on whatever hands-on writing tasks or content development tasks that I needed to do. And then in the afternoon, I would, try to combat the fatigue by having phone calls that I knew needed to happen, but I could also manage expectations of those calls and not feel so mentally drained by the time I got to them. I started walking in the middle of the day, just actually taking, 30 to 45 minutes to step out of the house, go for a walk. Maybe I'd have my phone on me, maybe I wouldn't. I'd let people know if I wasn't going to be reachable, but ultimately, that's how it is in an office, right? You are visiting with your coworkers, you may be sitting in their office. It's okay to go take coffee breaks and to find ways to get a little bit of mental rest and social time. When you're working from home, you don't have that. You have to force that and you have to build it into your schedule. The other thing is I would allow myself to take a break. If I really needed to work through and get through some major things the first part of the day, once I reached that mental exhaustion point, I'd allow myself, okay, I've had a full day. It doesn't have to be 8 hours. In a closing note, one comment that I have is actually a problem that I've never been able to solve, and that is the problem of my noisy dogs. I can't get them to stop barking, and they always bark in the middle of the most important call that I'm having that day. Connections. Be taken care of. The dog. The dog. So, if you are not a remote worker and you happen to be watching this and you work with someone who's working remotely that has children or dogs or insert other noisemaker, my request to you is that you extend them a little bit of grace. And for those of you who have noisemakers and you figured out this great solution other than running into the back of the house and hiding in a closet, which I've done on several occasions, please let me know. All right, that's it. Thanks for watching.